Welcome to Evolution Mindset, and today I've got the wonderful Joseph and Veronica here, experts in their field in trauma. From young to mature adults, these guys know it all when it comes to trauma. So I hope this is beneficial for everyone. If anyone has questions to these wonderful experts who are keen and they're very high in their field, so from 20 years to lifetime experiences, don't forget, help is just at your fingertips with these guys. If you want results, you get in touch with them. So without further ado, thank you guys for coming on. Let's talk about trauma.
Thank you for such a great introduction of us. And yes, so I guess we'll start from trauma, and then, for example, I do work with children, and it's definitely trauma-informed approach. And prior working with children, I worked with adults, and working with adults, sooner or later we would hit to the point when they would say that their childhood experiences affected them, what they are and how they do, how do they react, how do they behave, their choices nowadays when they were adults. So definitely it's something, it's such a global question about trauma and how it affects. But I'd say what's relevant here, it's to the entrepreneurial stress. Is that I understand correct? So it's impact of adverse childhood experiences. And in a way, you can say that it could affect negatively, but it could affect positively, if we may use these terms even. But definitely trauma is something that forms person's views, perspectives, values until they reassess it further at some next milestone. And for entrepreneurial stress, I'm just thinking about example. For instance, some children who were exposed to the adverse trauma or some experiences like that, they could really be good under big stress. Let's say that if you provide them like big amount of stress when the average person would be distressed, they would actually be feeling good about it. They will be managing it well. However, they are not very good under small triggers, let's say the daily stuff and things like this, and they would come across as perhaps impulsive people, or really what it just tells us, their nervous system is in that state of constant this hypervigilance, and they would overreact to the small things. But give them the big task, they would be flying for that.
Are you talking about me? Yeah. Are you talking about me? I feel like that.
You can relate. Okay.
Oh yeah, that is, yeah. Sorry, continue. I was like, oh my gosh, are you talking about me?
I'm glad I could, but it's just really when you talk about entrepreneurial profile, and it's really suggests, lots of stress, managing so many things, incoming, and that uncertainty and unpredictability. What it sometimes could tell us that when you were a child, there could be some uncertainty that you had to deal with, and then you learn how to deal with that. However, small things, because you apply the same hypervigilance, could really trigger the same response of managing everything on that scale, unfortunately. Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. I don't know about you, Joseph, but big things when it comes to juggling all of these big, deals and speaking and meeting high profiles, but it just comes to the simplest thing as what to make for dinner, and you're like, and you just go into stress. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's just, and you just...
Yeah, and I think some of the topics I find, like I agree totally with what she's saying, but I also find, I'm not sure about you, Veronica, but I also find that people have, unfortunately, coping mechanisms that often aren't very helpful, and that can also be a large part of it too. But I find actually if people work through, and change to healthier mechanisms, often they have a lot more resilience, and so it can actually be a benefit, I find. But often the coping mechanisms get in the way of living healthy lives, be it alcohol, drugs, all sorts of difficulties, and I'm just guessing that's what you see in your work as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we can fall into this, as you said, unhealthy resolution of the problems incoming with the substances and other, self-destructive behaviors. Yeah, and but to make that bridge or transition, learning or unlearning and then learning healthy behaviors is really, really where I think all the work lies.
You guys talk about bad habits. Now, what would you say for someone who has a insatiable gamble or a similar sort of thing where they can't? It's like a necessity in a way. What would be things that you could replace, or is it replaceable? Can you, with the good habits, how long will it take before it actually works for someone?
Well, gambling's an interesting one. So it's a little bit different from a lot of the other addictions. And one of the main things I've found with gambling that makes it very difficult is, say, with an alcohol problem or a meth problem, or most people know that it's a problem and that deep down they want to change. Unfortunately, with gamblers, it's actually not the same. Gamblers believe if they gamble enough, they'll win, which makes it quite a tricky thing to treat. This gambling fallacy that a lot of people have, and it's this idea that if I just gamble enough, or I just play the system enough, I'll get there. So gambling's quite a complex, difficult thing to treat. But if we remove gambling and we put some other thing here, another coping strategy, let's say a common one must be overworking or one of these other things. Yeah, I think there are ways forward. But again, it's like Veronica's saying, it's not just as easy as just changing behaviours and habits. My experiences. I mean, if it was easy, my job would be very easy. And of course, it's, I don't know about you, Veronica, but it's not easy for people to change, right? For myself or for others.
Yes.
And it often takes quite a lot of, like you beautifully said, learning and unlearning. And, learning where these things come from. How do they help? What do they prevent? What do they stop? What do they encourage?
What about robust anger that you don't realize you're being aggressive, but you think that you're educating someone, but you're being passive aggressive? I find that a lot of my clients who have team, they say, they think I'm a total, BIT, and or they think I'm a fiend of just, they get scared every time I walk into a room. I said, well, it's because they don't understand the level of pressure and you don't realize how much you're projecting out. How can one remove anger or passive aggressiveness or shitty bad habits like that can break a team or impact? And does it stem from what they learned as a child, thinking that's a good idea because that's what their parents were or environment was?
Well, while you were talking, Avriel, I was picturing also people's behavior. It's not always the people themselves, but we really want to break it down, what's behind that behavior. And if you say it's passive aggressive, it could be many things, but it could be, actually protecting themselves from the very beginning because they are ready to be attacked all the time. So that's their nervous system learned somewhere when they were a child. They have to be always protect themselves a step ahead or 10 steps ahead. And perhaps sometimes it could be also when there is aggression, a passive aggressive, it's simply power game. And maybe they were powerless and then they feel like they are in power when they, let's say, attack first, when they're coming in with certain demeanor and they set the tone. So could be lots of things. And also just add into that gambling thing, because it often goes with the entrepreneurial behavior. We often hear when people get money, they actually spend them or lose all the money. It's almost that if again we go beyond the behavior, they almost self-sabotage themselves. And gambling, Joseph, you said that exactly right. It's almost a standalone addiction. It's not the same as alcohol or when you alter your state or things like this. You're fully aware when you gamble what you're doing, unfortunately. And then even with understanding also sometimes, it's culturally accepted, at least, in Australia. So there's so many factors that make it has even this coolness around it. I can gamble, the casino, and that's the representation in society. So that doesn't help really, when you try to step away from that. But what I'm trying to break it down to, it's always about what people present to us, their behavior, it's usually not who they are. And we really want to find out what motivation behind it, or inspiration, what drives them, to behave like this.
Yeah. So like coming back to say teenage, so like, okay, you don't know better as a child, and you get to a teenage year and you feel like you're Superman or Supergirl, and you want to, cover the world with whatever you're good at, and just nothing can hurt me sort of thing. And then realizing later on, like, that there is a barrier, there is now hurdles and challenges. And does that carry through into entrepreneurship? Does that jeopardize someone's thought process to be overly conscientious and then be in procrastination and paralysis where they're perpetually thinking and not action taking? And is there steps that you could do possibly to shake yourself from that?
Well, I think about my experience with teens is they may present that way in a very strong, bold way, but I often find a lot of them are very, very fragile, actually, underneath this very brave, often brash exterior. There's often a very vulnerable person that's trying to work out, I'm not really a child anymore, but I'm not quite an adult now, but I'm trying to transition. So, but of course, everybody's different, right? We're not all the same. This is quite a big generic statement I make, because of course there are people who are very bold and brash and stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think in some ways in entrepreneurship, you've got to have that tough skin. You've got to have that risk-taking ability. You've got to be able to do and survive stuff other people wouldn't. And that does require a certain way. I quite like Jimmy Carr, the comedian's take on it, which is, you can't have good character in an easy life.
I love that saying. I actually going to see him later this year.
Oh, great! I'm jealous. But I really like that, because it really highlights, that for us to have that kind of thick skin, and I don't mean callous being I don't feel anything, I'm numb, but to have thick skin, to be able to tolerate, risk, and you do have to have like a certain kind of personality type and bits and pieces as well, and I don't think everybody's cut out for it, which is, I think I say to clients all the time, we can't all be therapists, and thank God for that. It's that idea that we can all be ourselves and have our own strengths and our own things. But I think, yeah, definitely you do need a tough skin, and you do need that kind of, resilience and tolerance for distress, as Veronica was saying, and stuff like that, which is, you do need that in the entrepreneurial space. But I'll be interested to hear what you think about this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joseph, but I also want to clarify, Abriel, what did you say about procrastinating later? What was the question around procrastination?
So, because some individuals are very thought-based, so their psychology is not to act, but they go into paralysis analysis, and then they don't react or respond, and then they end up missing that opportunity, and then they're disheartened, and then they go introverted. And now that, I guess I'm aiming it towards the AI, where they don't feel that connection, even though they've got a superior AI as teenagers, as adults, and they don't feel that connection, but then it's an introverted sort of communication, but they're somehow getting that sort of information, but still feeling disconnected. And I guess that comes to that procrastination and that paralysis, where you're like, I've got so much and I don't know what to do now. And the time that should have been acted is just put them in a bit of a frozen state. And how can they break that cycle? And how can they, or have you guys seen anyone on that spectrum?
So you mean like if a person naturally have kind of pattern of both procrastination, and then when the opportunity is in front of them, they don't take it, and then they regret or that they didn't take that step or their, because I think it's very important to differentiate the steps. If a person simply observing that behavior and really okay that they missed that opportunity, that's nothing wrong with that. They just really can engage in so many other things in life. And we're coming back to, again, know yourself, what exactly, what you are built for, what do you stand for, what's yours, and perhaps, remove that comparison. If I don't do that, if I'm not exactly entrepreneur or scaling up constantly or constantly expanding or things like this, something's wrong with me, and then sometimes it can be portrayed like this externally from social media, that you constantly have to be on the move and things like this. So if a person completely okay, and procrastination for them, it's simply a way of living, when they just step back and pause, assess and say, look, I actually don't want that opportunity. I prefer, different lifestyle. That's totally okay. I think here would be the approach for them is to just to feel good about who they are, rather than chasing something that simply not them. I would probably take that angle here, and just to explore, who are you? What do you feel like? What do you want?
I hear that, and I guess the reason why I asked that is because when I was younger, I had a lot of environmental, I had a lot of culture, I had a lot of I was like an onion girl, so I had heaps of layers. So in order to know oneself wasn't the opportunity that was given. So even as a teenager, it was a bit difficult to understand who you were when it was already pre-given to you who the heck you are. And then to know that, and then go back and recalibrate yourself, then put you in a state of awareness where you're like dizzy. And then there's an overwhelming of this, you've been told you got to be this, you got to be a doctor, you got to be this, you got to be that. And then you're like, but I can't spell, but I can't do maths. And how, and then that puts you in a state of frozenness where you're like, now we've got AI. I can't even deal with tech. How do I go from here? And it just puts you in a state that I don't belong. But is it truly you don't belong, or is it just that it's too challenging? What is that in a mental state? Is that a trauma trigger, or is it just like, I feel like I get anxiety in that? Is that I don't know. Is there something that you guys would have seen with the young teens, or like where they just like, I give up? Sure.
I would see it with not just young teens. I think it's general for population. We do have generally fall into this generalized anxiety, about our future, and we are just left behind, or we're not keeping up and things like this. And it's, in a way, it's normal. I think all we can do is really to try again to regulate our state, to go back, to even with this, for example, you mentioned AI. Okay, that's now a new thing, and some people use it, but other people say you have to use it to the maximum, and don't just lose that boat. Just getting when it's good to get on, and perhaps just some people will get on that high speed boat. And that's okay, but it's coming back to yourself to regulate the state. And because from a state of anxiety, only anxious thoughts can be produced, really, and nothing we can control externally but the state, the internal state. That's all we can do. And then regulating nervous system and asking, okay, what part of AI can I implement realistically in my life, apart from listening to robots and other things, and then it will replace us. What really is happening for me with this AI? Like being real about it, because sometimes it's like all this state of illusion, it's the Terminator's coming, in a couple of years and things like this. We don't know what we don't know. We will find out, if something will be there. So I think, just maybe to talk to other people and say, how's it for you? be able to ask those questions and be ready for real answers as well. Just to find out how other people, and we'll find out that all of us, a little bit worried about the AI, perhaps, at some level, all of us worried about our future, all of us worried about can we travel safely in our life, all these things, just they add up. But what we can do, like us now here talking and, using our own mechanisms and finding out what works for us just to regulate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really like what Veronica's saying, and people finding their own mind about this stuff, I think, is so important. And my experience is very mixed. Like, young people, some people are really conscious about the planet and think that AI, the stuff that AI, the data centers and stuff are doing is abhorrent to the impacts on the planet. And other people enjoy it and use it. But one thing I do find, which is, and it's trying to keep hope often with young people, because I find a lot of young people can get very hopeless about the future being, there's no jobs or there's no security and no. So for me, I try and be hopeful with young people and hold that, look, AI is the next new thing, but there's been many, many new things and many, many developments, and there's probably more to come. But I do find a lot of teens at times can be very, very hopeless. And I'm not sure about over in Australia, but here in New Zealand, there's a very much job shortage and a lot of young people can't get work. So it can also be very tough in that space as well, where people are struggling in a lot of ways. So I find also having hope with young people, talking great, really finding our own identity and our own where we stand with this stuff, and also having hope as well, I think is very, very important.
Beautifully said. Hope, identity, what you are, who you are, support, things like this. Because yes, just amongst all other things, that's what we have, and it always stands the time as well. Support, feelings, feeling good, embrace the whole spectrum.
Wow, I really love this, and I know there's a lot of young people out there. If you guys are needing help, please reach out to these wonderful people. Joseph and Veronica are always there on the dial, and I really appreciate you guys being here. This has been a very, very eye-opening and really important thing for the young people and for entrepreneurs out there. Thank you so much for both of your times. I will leave their links below. Please reach out. They've got heaps, if not more, oodles of noodles, literally better than migraine. Go ahead, connect with them. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.